Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Ross Blum. He's the COO at Sky Robotics. Ross, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Really appreciate it. But it's Skyline Robotics.
Oh, let's try that again. What did I say?
Just Sky.
You said Sky.
Sorry. All right. Okay, let me try that again. Sorry. All right. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Ross Blum. He's the COO at Skyline Robotics. Ross, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me today, Kevin. Really excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at Skyline Robotics is actually really innovative and cool. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. I grew up in New York City. So I've been surrounded by skyscrapers my whole life, and it just feels like home.
Okay, very cool. So you went to university. What did you take and why?
So I went to a college called Babson College.
Okay.
At Babson, you actually only have one option of a major as an undergraduate, which is business management. But
Okay,
Babson
that's
is
not
really
terrible.
known, but Babson's really known around the world for their focus on entrepreneurship. You know, they've been rated #1 for over many decades in a row now on an annual basis. But from Babson, I thought I wanted to create a business at the intersection of television and sports. It was right around the time when sports rights fees, the television deals were getting so out of control, billions and billions of dollars, annually. And so I went and got a master's from Georgetown in
Okay,
sports management.
interesting.
Didn't really see the natural sort of like outlet, in terms of where I wanted to start a business from there. So I ended up pursuing law school at Cardozo back in New York City. And, in my 3 years at Cardozo, I had the opportunity to be a part of what was called the Tech Startup Clinic and
Okay.
really fell back in love, with entrepreneurship. And so after I passed the bar, I really knew that I didn't want to be sitting in a cubicle billing hours, for some client that I may not, really love or care about. So, I ended up deciding to come into the startup world right after I passed the bar.
Very cool. Okay, interesting. And obviously having a legal background in startups is never a bad thing.
No, I've definitely been able to save a few dollars for the companies that I've worked for over time. So no complaints there. But I think that the biggest benefit of the legal background, honestly, is sort of risk tolerance. So a big part of law school and going through becoming a lawyer is being able to evaluate risk and really being able to apply that to the businesses that I've worked in, understanding what our risk tolerances are and where we want to push the boundaries and where we want to be safe. Really has been valuable as well.
No, makes a lot of sense. So walk us through your career up until Skyline Robotics.
Sure thing. So right after passing the bar, I joined a company called Ping MD. At Ping MD, we were a health tech company and a secure communications platform doing telehealth before telehealth became really big and ubiquitous everywhere. So I
Sure.
first started in a legal position at Ping MD, but quickly started taking over some other departments. I quickly was tasked with rebuilding the sales team, where we sort of reinvented it as like an SDR team. I started making partnership presentations to hospitals, doctors' offices, etc. And eventually got a call from my chairman one day, honestly, that he said that they weren't so pleased with the CEO's performance and wanted to know if I would go and sell the company. So as an entrepreneur, but having absolutely no clue how to go and do that, of course I said yes. And got the team ready, built the decks, got the consideration set of who might buy us done. Led a few presentations, and in about 90 days, we were able to get a deal done with a buyer out of Miami. From
Keep
Sorry.
going.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So right after Ping MD, the board and the investors in general were very pleased with me. So they sort of shopped me around to all their other startup investments in New York City. I ended up deciding to join a company called Quid, where we were a rare digital goods marketplace. So we partnered with brands such as Marvel, Disney, Hasbro, the NBA, Major League Baseball, 325 in total, and
That's cool.
sold rare digital versions on a centralized format, of their intellectual property, but using sort of common forms that people were familiar with, digital trading cards, digital stickers, and digital toys. And although it's certainly not, a Guinness Book of World Records by any means, I built this portfolio of 325 brands, and no one else has created a larger digital rights catalog on the planet to this point.
Very
So
cool.
at Quid, started off in a partnerships, role, but quickly again sort of began rising throughout the organization, taking over more and more teams, eventually leading to the point where I got named COO a little bit after we were fortunate enough to raise our Series A from Sequoia.
Okay. Congrats.
In that role, well, congrats is relative. It's the high of highs,
Sure.
overall, but you got to make it count from there as well. But in the role of COO, oversaw all day to day. But really, everyone at Quid and candidly now at Skyline as well knows that I love to call myself a janitor. At the end of the day, my job is to clean things up and make them work better, and I love doing anything I can to make that possible.
Very cool. Okay. So, how did Skyline Robotics come on your radar and what made you actually join that team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the CEO of the company, who's named Michael Brown, Michael and I both joined in December of 2020. Michael and I have a twisted, in a strange way, family sort of relationship. And he knew I was exiting Quid, and Michael had been looking for, automated window cleaning companies to potentially take the next step in his career. He's, about 30 years older than I am, much more experienced, but always big into sort of companies that are disrupting markets. So he brought me into the loop, and the first meeting I ever had with the founders of Skyline Robotics was actually about 11 months before I joined in January of 2020, presenting to them how I thought the business could grow, where we would need to sort of, focus for the next sort of 6, 12, 18, and 24 months. And really sort of beginning to change the business model. When I had, met the founders, it was sort of a first party cleaning company. What I mean by that was they actually intended to have, operators, sales and marketing staff in every single region, around the globe. But you imagine to reach every single building, you're going to need thousands and thousands of people. There's so many, buildings out there. So we sort of reshaped the business model a bit to being sort of a B2B2C model. So we're creating partnerships with current window cleaning companies who already have market share, but are already are still hungry for more. And through the first 10 months or 11 months of 2020, started having weekly calls, trying to advise the founders a little bit on how to do things, handle things, change processes, things of that nature, and just began to sort of fall in love with the company, fall in love with the potential. And that's one thing, this company has always had a ton of potential, but never any traction, never really getting going, and having a really tough time sort of breaking through. So the cold start problem is tough for everyone. Everyone solves it a little bit differently. But for us coming in and sort of officially joining the company, it was sort of a change to the business model that has now allowed us to begin to get traction.
Very cool. So, how did you go about getting that change and restructuring the business model? Because that's a lot harder, or it's easier said than done.
So it's been a lot of early mornings, for me. So the team in Israel is 7 hours ahead of me.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I've slept in the past year, but it's been a lot of sweat and hard work that's gone into it. Being up at the crack of dawn every single day, and really just sort of creating the change. Now, it's easier said than done in certain cases. And with Skyline, it's not as if there was sort of a tremendous business that had been built already. The technology was built, the technology's been on track, sort of like with the roadmap, but the business never really sort of got going. So it's not as if we had a ton of deals in place and had to sort of renegotiate or sort of restructure how those deals existed or exist still today. And so the technology was sort of the baseline, and we had a lot of ability to still implement a new business model without really messing anything up.
No, makes a lot of sense. So, what exactly does Skyline Robotics do, and how are you leveraging technology with hardware? I get it's more complicated than hardware, but we'll elaborate on that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So first and foremost, we're a software company. Actually, all the hardware is all off the shelf product. It's not
Oh,
manufactured
interesting.
by us. We take reputable brands products, or assemble it in the way that we assemble it. But our secret sauce really lies in the software layer. But what we're doing at Skyline is we want to own the work at heights sort of market. Work at heights is defined as, work that's completed 5 meters or higher, in the air. But we're starting with window cleaning and starting with our first product, Osmo. So, our vision for the product Osmo is to own the facade. What I mean by that is not just window cleaning happens on the facade of a building. There's inspection, there's masonry, there's polishing, and a few other categories of items as well. But the product is in a place where we can start with window cleaning and begin to build those product extensions from there. So our vision really for Osmo is to own the facade. And with in the world of prop tech right now, which is incredibly hot in a lot of ways, 99.9% is really focused on sort of the indoor environment of a building, either the operations becoming more efficient, onboarding new tenants, lead generation, things like that. What separates us is that we're focused on what happens outside of the four walls, and there's very few
Okay.
people that are focused on that.
Got it. Okay. So, how exactly does Osmo work, and how do you tie the software into, like basically something that's in the sky?
It's a great question. So we use existing building infrastructure, which is a really, really important point in how the product was developed. There had been previous attempts, even dating back, a couple decades, of people trying to, create automated window cleaning products, but they required custom infrastructure be installed on the roof. Once you're installing anything custom on a roof after it's already been approved by whichever city or state department of buildings, the compliance hurdles become very, very tough. So when creating Osmo, honestly, some of the first meetings that the company ever had, much before I joined the company, were with regulators. Understanding what would be acceptable, what wouldn't be acceptable, because if the company was going to make the investment into building this product over a number of years, they obviously wanted to make sure that it would fit within sort of compliance regulations. So, one of the big sort of factors that comes into play for us and what makes us different than people that have come before us is there's nothing custom that's required at any building. What people know about window cleaning usually is that they've seen generally two guys, on the side of the building, with their squeegee and towels and things like that, cleaning each window. What people don't see typically is that there's actually a humongous crane that's located on the top of the building. That crane is called a building maintenance unit, or a BMU. And that
Okay.
crane, it actually controls that basket that you see people standing in.
Got
So a lot of our software, so our product is designed to fit into any single BMU that exists. There's probably a few out there, a very small sliver of the market that maybe we don't fit into just based on the size of the product. But the product weighs about the same as a human being, plugs right into the basket, and actually automates the use of the crane as well to make the cleaning process more efficient.
Interesting. So, how does the software actually make use AI to actually clean the window properly?
Sure. So there's a lot of different layers, obviously, to the software that's been written. We have a lidar camera or sensor. That's part of the system. The lidar is looking actually for the window frames. So it's
Oh, okay.
defining when it's which is important because there's a lot of reflectivity, in the glass, whether it's from the sun or otherwise. So
Sure.
filtering that out, is an important piece of is that it's sort of in front of a window. The brush will engage with the window, and actually monitor sort of like the cleaning quality that exists. For the time being, we've found that 3 strokes left and right produces a very high cleaning quality, and that's been sort of independently tested, by a potential partner of ours. And as it's cleaning the facade, as it's going back and forth, it descends once it determines that it's been it's clean enough, and we'll keep moving down the facade at the rate as efficiently as it can. And about 200 times every single second, the cleaning path is recalculated. That's important because there's a lot of variables that we might face. You can think of like wind, for example, which could reposition the basket, as an
Sure.
example. So it's important that Osmo's brain is able to realize what it has cleaned, what it hasn't cleaned, and even with those disturbances or movements in the basket, it understands exactly what it has done and what it still needs to do, and we'll proceed as efficiently as possible.
Interesting. So is Osmo actually connected to like cell towers, and is it constantly sending data, or is it self-containing thing?
So there are sort of a suite of sensors that are included, and those sensors do need to communicate, with each other. And so we do have an Ethernet over IP system as well as a 4G antenna that's usually on site with us as well for redundancy.
Okay.
And yeah, so the sensors, including some that are located or connected to the crane, so it can tell how far down the facade, essentially, it's descended already.
Right.
Need to be able to communicate with each other. And obviously an important piece of the puzzle to make sure that the system always knows, exactly what's happening from many different perspectives.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious then to dive a little bit deeper into the actual software side, because like it sounds so simple, but from a software perspective, it's very complex what you guys are doing. You're constantly checking things, you're constantly worried about weather conditions, and a handful of other things. So do you want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the aspects and features of the software?
Well, we can certainly go take the conversation there a little bit, Kevin. I think, one of the important sort of factors that I haven't really brought up yet is really safety. One of the big sort of value props of what we do, is obviously reduce the risk to human life. And we would sort of be doing this counterintuitively, if safety wasn't a big priority in any sort of feature that was being developed. And so any single feature, for the most part, that we're developing, we always bring in either a safety expert, a regulator, or otherwise, just to always ensure that what we're building is not just compliant, but also sort of like independently evaluated as sort of like a safe approach, to be able to handle situations. So we haven't
Right.
had any instances where we've destroyed anything or anything like that. But with multivariable environments, anything can happen at any point, and so safety and sort of like redundancy across the system are just crucial.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and sure, right? Like especially with wind, and it can get pretty wild, right? And can sway that little basket quite a bit, right? And yeah,
Yeah,
no, that
and
makes sense.
and some of the most important features that the company has developed, and candidly, it'll be a feature that will continue optimizing as we go on, is the sort of stabilization features that exist, being able to restabilize the basket even with gusts of wind. So we actually have 3 different variants of a stabilization algorithm, depending on how thick the window sill of a building is. So not the
Oh,
window, but the
interesting.
windowsill. Because Osmo will sort of reverse oscillate in a sense to restabilize the basket in a sort of counter to the forces that it's experiencing in a live format. And then as it restabilizes and gets within sort of like the thresholds that we've set for the system, it re-begins sort of like the cleaning process. So, the stabilization algorithms are sort of core and fundamental, to everything that we do. And, really sort of, again, sort of help us sort of separate ourselves from competition in the marketplace.
Right. Okay. So does a human being though actually have to go to the top of the building, load Osmo back into the basket, and then once it's done, kind of take it out and put it away? Or how does that kind of work?
Sure. So we don't run the operation without humans, and I don't know that we ever will run the operations with zero humans.
Okay.
We currently have two humans who are on site during our operations. One is sitting in front of a laptop, which is just what we call sort of like the operator laptop, which has a GUI. He can see everything. He or she can see everything that's happening. He or she can send the robot back to its like home position. If there's any error messages that come up, the GUI has prompts, and can direct the operator and sort of like next steps to follow. And the other person is typically either a lookout or just someone who's on site to release more either power cord or water reel, because two things that our system requires are water and power. And
Right.
so always making sure that the reels are sort of let out appropriately is something that's still a little bit of a manual process for us, but by the end of this year we'll have automated reels that'll communicate with the rest of the system, and we'll be able to reduce the number of staff on site to one human.
Got it. Okay. And so you mentioned earlier looking at partnering with current companies that do this. What's the learning curve for a company to adopt this technology?
So it's a great question, Kevin. We're about to sort of like announce our first major partnership. So we've been operating the units in Israel as sort of a first party company, not just to
Okay.
complete cleaning operations, but lots of R&D, sort of like field testing. It's a type of thing where like the world has to be our lab. At the end
Right.
of the day, we can only, we have a setup in our office, that's a lab, but being able to test on buildings is vitally, vitally important. In order to sort of like validate, the releases, as sort of successful. But to this point, we actually haven't trained, fully trained a third party. That's about to
Okay.
happen in about a month from now. And we've invested a lot into training, materials, certainly revising the product manuals, all safety procedures, things like that. We currently have slotted a 5-day training course, but
Okay.
it is something that we're going to learn as we go and hopefully get more efficient over time. So 5 days we view as a lengthy period of time for the training, but we're just over budgeting time just to be safe.
Got you. Okay. And then how do you handle like tricky corners or tight corners or small corners? Is it kind of similar to how like a human would handle it, or how do you deal with some of the trickier architecture on buildings?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do a significant amount of testing on complex facades, but we don't outwardly claim to this point to be handle any architecture that exists. For us, we know we need to be able to handle all sort of architectural angles, and these architects are getting more and more creative every single day.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, there's so much market opportunity that exists with flat facades, which make up the majority of the skyscrapers that exist. But in some of the more recent, development efforts that have happened, there's certainly, more complex architecture, and we know we need to be able to handle those. So we can handle the majority of the market, but we know we need to, be able to handle 100% of the market that's out there.
Got you. Okay. And so is some of that stuff kind of getting back to my software question? Is like some of that stuff software upgrades, or would you have to like potentially change out different arms, or how would that potentially work?
So, it's not going to be exactly one size fits all. It's going to be like one
Okay.
size fits 99.5%.
Right.
There's always going to be some building out there that has some architectural feature that, candidly might just be, a little bit too difficult, for Osmo. But as we're getting going here, and as we're partnering or beginning to partner, with window cleaning companies, the way that this is sort of positioned to them is that this is like the most high-powered squeegee they could have in the world. It's going to make them more efficient, reduce time on site. But today, it might not be able to handle 100% of everything. So again, we know we need to get to that point in time, and whether it's a software or mechanical upgrade, it might depend on the specific feature that we're talking about, Kevin.
Hmm.
But we do obviously want to lean into as many sort of software angles to implementation as possible, and reducing the number of times that we would have to change any components on the hardware side.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And then I'm assuming then all the units are constantly being updated, or you're pushing software updates on a somewhat of a regular schedule?
Yeah, you're exactly right. When you're inventing things, though, Kevin, I'm used to sort of like mobile app development, from
Sure,
my
yep.
previous companies. Your 2 week sprints, or in some cases maybe a 4 week sprint, this or that. Something's coming out, every 2 weeks if you're a consumer. In this company, the development process is obviously a little bit different. You've got to, align mechanical, electrical, as well as software, and it moves in sort of a waterfall format, in some ways like that. So we do have regular updates to code, but it's not regular in terms of standardized as every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks or things like that.
Sure. That makes sense. So how have you managed your roadmap compared to maybe some feature requests that you're getting from the companies you're starting to partner with? Because they like some of them probably understand technology and software a lot and probably not so much and everywhere in the middle. And it's how do you juggle that? Because that's got to be challenging. And then making sure it works with what you currently have.
100%. And as we're really about to, get going and onboarding our first major customer, in the next few weeks, the thing that I'm most excited for, Kevin, is to get their feedback.
Okay.
So we have had plenty of people look at the product and give us feedback. A lot of their feedback, honestly, aligns with how we want to make the product better, how we want to make it more efficient, how we want to make it sort of both visually and sort of from a product standpoint more effective. But there have been instances where there's not 100% alignment. And when you're in any business and that comes up, you always have to look at what do I need to do to either make the customer happy, what are the costs involved in that, what are the benefits of that, or what am I going to do because I believe that this is sort of like the next step in the roadmap that I need to take. So these sort of problems are not something that's unique to us at Skyline Robotics. What makes us, a little bit different is we're purely inventing this, stuff. It's not as if somebody else has created this product or this type of product before. There's some roadmap or playbook or however else you want to call it, for us to follow. So we know, candidly where our weak points are. We know where we're strong, and again, as we're bringing on this first major customer, we do expect a lot of feedback. And for me personally, I love that stuff. I can't wait to be on site taking notes, really digging into the details, with them. And we're ready to attack that and add it to the backlog and prioritize it appropriately, given sort of the other projects that we have ongoing. But we know it's sort of like the entering the commercialization phase for the company brings up new challenges, new things you need to be able to do, a different type of agility that a company needs to have rather than just when you're building on the R&D side. And we're ready for it all.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you're actually it's interesting that you bring this up because you're right. You're at like a really exciting point in the company's history or any company's history where you're onboarding your big clients, you get to see their feedback, you get to see the good and bad and how things are playing out. And then, it's nothing's better than real world feedback from an actual user. And if you get the luxury of actually being able to see it in action while, they're using it, that's even better.
100%. And this is something that I definitely tried to, champion at the previous companies that I was at. We didn't just use, usertesting.com, which a lot of people
Sure.
do. We would bring in, people off the street, we would give them a $10 gift card to Starbucks, try to get some, real live feedback that we could, engage with. Customer feedback is incredibly important, candidly, no matter what business you're in. And we cannot turn a blind eye to it. We have to embrace it, and we have to know that it's going to make us better.
Sure. So you have a pretty big demo coming up in New York City. Do you want to talk about what exactly you're doing with that?
Sure, we can talk about it a little bit. I'll probably leave a few details out, for the time being.
Sure.
But the broad strokes are New York is the mecca of skyscrapers. I'm from New York. Michael, our CEO, is from New Jersey / New York, and we have great relationships that exist here. New York makes a lot of sense for us for a few reasons, not just the fact that there's a lot of buildings here, not just that it's a pinnacle of being a city, at least here in the United States, but really because of the labor costs as well. One of the things that sort of drives payback period and things like that is the labor costs in a given market. And for window cleaners, there's no better paid market than New York City. So we're partnering, with a current building services company called Platinum Inc., which already owns at least one contract for 65% of the Class A buildings in New York City. And our first deployment with Platinum, which will be run by Platinum staff after having been trained and certified by Skyline staff, will be located at 10 Hudson Yards, which we are incredibly, incredibly excited about. And for those of you who don't know, Hudson Yards is a brand new sort of like premier development here in New York City. There's a number of buildings on the Hudson Yards campus, and there's no better sort of company to bring this to, or campus to bring this to, because one of the core pieces of what Hudson Yards is related to innovation and thinking differently and things like that. So we're incredibly, incredibly excited, emboldened, and just ready to get going, for this partnership and for the first deployment here in New York City.
Very cool. So I'm curious then, how do you guys decide on kind of where to go next? Is your big focus just getting Ozmo in, as many cities as possible and then work on another product? Or are you guys working on a bunch of other products in this space as well? You don't have to necessarily talk about specific products, but like, I'm just kind of curious in figuring out, are you really focused on Ozmo, or are you kind of working on a bunch of stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kevin, because it's a huge strategic point. So while we're very excited for what's happening in New York, and we know we're going to be bringing units to New York, a number of units to New York over the next couple of years, we also understand where we are as a company. And I brought this up before, but we're sort of at this inflection point of like starting commercialization and about to get sort of our major first customer and customer feedback.
Yep.
We envision that with that feedback, we've got a little bit of work left to do, essentially. So while we're beginning to form relationships, or at least, creating NDAs with window cleaning companies on a global basis, we're not in a rush today to try to sign 10 deals, 15 deals, because we don't know that we're exactly ready to sort of go from zero to like mass scale,
Got
overnight.
you.
There's sort of this like interim period where we want to sort of validate with a third party that we're really ready for that. And we think that that's sort of like the smart and strategic way to grow this, because I can't tell you, Kevin, enough. We get so much inbound interest for this product, and not just
Sure.
from small places around the globe, really from major players. No marketing efforts from the company, to this point in time. These are people that just want to be innovative, that their brands are well established, that they want to be future proofed and things like that. And there's so much demand for the product that really what we're focused on is trying to do this the right way, rather than trying to get too far out over our skis and ending up in a bad position.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense because it's really easy to try to rush to as many people as possible, right? And you want to make sure you iron out as many kinks as you can in the whole process before you do that, right? And I think how you guys are going about it makes a lot of sense, especially when there's so many moving parts and things in play, with software and hardware and human beings, right? And then weather conditions and a bunch of other things. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and again, it's having the conviction in our plan, that gives me confidence. And what I mean by that, again, if we wanted to go and pre-sell a bunch of units today, I feel pretty confident that we could go and do that. But
Okay.
we really want to build this the right way, because if I pre-sell units on a distributed basis, it means we need to be able to handle customer service everywhere, maintenance everywhere, like all at the same time. And those
Right.
are extremely sort of risky propositions when you're talking about budgeting and things like that. So when we're entering a market, we want to enter the market with a current key market participant, who has a number of buildings already under contract, and we're just inserting our product into their workflow and then growing the support network behind them.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. So you obviously have a bunch of experience working with remote teams. What advice do you give people that are going to probably either have been working remote or will probably stay remote or partly remote once the pandemic is, you know, kind of not gone, but it's like COVID's not as much of a thing as it is currently.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's always a difficult balance to find. Okay, how am I going to structure my meetings, even when I'm in person in the office with everybody? The worst thing we
Right.
can do as a company is be in meetings all day, because that means no one's being like productive.
Totally.
So how do we use our time like most efficiently to sort of structure what we're doing to get the right updates, the right touch points, and the right pieces of the process together so that everything just flows? And every organization's a little bit different on this front. But the thing that I would sort of stress to everybody is don't inundate your staff, your team, with meetings just because you're remote. You've brought these people here because you think that they're valuable, because you think that they're great at what they do. Put your trust in them. But it's always that trust but verify sort of mentality that I bring.
Sure.
And just make sure that you're not keeping everyone on the phone all day every day, because there's a lot of things to be done. It's really tough to build something out of nothing, and when you're a startup, it's you against the world, and every second counts. So use that time wisely, because time's the most valuable resource any of us have.
No, I 100% agree with you, but we're kind of coming to the end of the show. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about Skyline Robotics and any other links you want to mention?
Sure. We certainly have a website, www.skylinerobotics.com. We update, Twitter and LinkedIn pretty regularly. We do have, Facebook and Instagram pages as well. But, since our business model is sort of B2B, more than it is B2C, we do prioritize sort of posting on LinkedIn and Twitter, more than other platforms. And you should be able to find a lot of news about us in the very near future. And we're just so excited for everything that's coming down the pipeline. And we are going to own the facade at the end of the day.
Very cool. Well, Ross, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It's
Mm.
been great speaking with you, and you've got a great podcast here, and just so happy to be a part of it.
Thanks very much. You have a good rest of your day. Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.